Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going on a bit of a journey, maybe challenging something we all kind of take for granted. The idea that the history we learned in school, the big names, the famous events, that's the whole story.
Right, that it's sort of complete, finished.
Exactly. But what if it's not? What if the people who really shaped things, the ones who made the biggest difference, aren't the ones on the statues?
It's a really powerful thought, and it's precisely what we're exploring today. We've been digging into this fantastic source document. It's called Heroes Absent from Textbooks.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And it makes it so clear that there's this whole other layer of history. Activists, scientists, women, rebels, people who absolutely changed the world but were, well, often erased. Systematically sometimes.
Right. So that's our mission today. We really want to unpack this source material for you. We want to get into why these figures disappear, what's the impact, when whole stories are just missing.
And crucially, why are they coming back now? Why this resurgence of interest?
It's all about getting past the headlines, getting you that shortcut to being genuinely well-informed about how history shapes us right now.
Couldn't have put it better myself. It's a fascinating hidden history.
So let's dive right in. Okay, let's start with that big question, the one that really sits under everything else. Who actually writes history? And maybe more importantly, why? We've all heard that phrase, right? History is written by the victors.
It's almost a cliche at this point.
It is. But the source material really pushes us beyond just thinking about, wars and empires.
Absolutely. It's much deeper than that. It's about whose perspective ends up dominating, whose values, whose social structures, whose version of reality gets cemented as the version.
So the victors aren't just armies. They're the ones who control the narrative.
Precisely. The document stresses that this isn't just about sloppy record-keeping. Forgetting isn't always accidental. It's often a mechanism, a way of maintaining a certain order, whether that's political, economic, cultural. And what tends to happen, as our source shows again and again, is that stories challenging that order, stories of quiet resistance, or scientific ideas that rock the boat, or cultural shifts from the margins, they just fall through the cracks.
Why? Because they're inconvenient.
Exactly. They might threaten the status quo, contradict the myths a society tells itself. It's not always some grand conspiracy, men in smoke-filled rooms plotting erasure. Often it's more systemic. A kind of ingrained bias, a selective memory that reinforces the dominant story, the one that serves those already in power.
So it's baked into the system almost, less like a deliberate plot, more like cultural gravity, pulling towards the established narrative.
That's a great way to put it, cultural gravity. And it means, for you listening, that there's this whole hidden timeline out there.
A timeline of people who made a massive difference, but whose impact was either ignored or, maybe even more disturbingly, actively covered up.
And this document, Heroes Absent from Textbooks, it really gives us an amazing window into that hidden timeline. It brings these individuals out of the shadows, people who fought oppression, reshaped societies, changed the future, often without getting any credit at all.
It's actually really inspiring to see their stories finally getting told. Okay, so let's make this real. The source gives us some incredible examples. Let's talk about Olympe de Gouges.
Yes, from the 1770s, France. Right in the thick of the French Revolution.
Yeah, we all learned about the Bastille, liberty, equality, fraternity, all the big moments. But Olympe de Gouges, honestly, I hadn't heard much about her before digging into this.
And that's the point, isn't it? She was this extraordinary early feminist writer, arguing fiercely for women's rights during the Revolution.
You'd think a revolution aiming for equality would be all over that.
You would.
Yeah.
But paradoxically, women's rights were just left out, ignored. She saw this, and in 1791, she wrote her famous Declaration of the Rights of Woman and of the Female Citizen.
Directly challenging the official declaration.
Directly, pointing out the hypocrisy. Demanding full equality for women in every sphere, political, legal, social.
That's incredibly brave for the time. So what happened to her? Was she celebrated?
No, not exactly. She was executed, guillotined during the Reign of Terror.
Wow. Just silenced.
Utterly silenced. Her ideas about genuine gender equality were seen as too radical, too disruptive, a threat to the patriarchal order, even within a movement that was supposed to be about liberation.
It's such a stark reminder, isn't it?
Yeah.
That even supposedly progressive eras can violently suppress ideas that challenge the core power structures.
Her story is a tragic, powerful lesson. It wasn't just happening in France. Let's jump across the Atlantic to Haiti.
Okay.
And talk about Toussaint Louverture. Early 1800s. This is a name that should be absolutely central to world history.
Why is that?
Because he led the only successful slave revolt in recorded history. Think about that.
The only one.
The only one that resulted in the formation of an independent nation? Haiti. A man born into slavery rises up, defeats the armies of France, Spain, and Britain. It's an almost unbelievable story.
It sounds like something out of a movie. How is that not common knowledge?
Well, think about what his success represented. The creation of the first free Black republic in the Americas. It fundamentally contradicted everything the colonial powers stood for.
Right. It shattered the whole narrative of racial hierarchy, the justification for slavery that underpinned their entire global economy.
Exactly. His victory wasn't just inconvenient. It was existentially threatening to the world order of the time. So what did they do?
Let me guess. They buried the story.
Pretty much. Minimized it, ignored it, framed it as an anomaly. It's a classic case of deliberately omitting a narrative because it fundamentally challenges the dominant account of history.
It's staggering. And erasure isn't always about politics or revolution, is it? Sometimes it's, well, business, like with Nikola Tesla.
Ah, Tesla. Yes, the early 1900s. Everyone knows Edison, right? The Wizard of Menlo Park.
Sure, light bulbs, phonograph.
But Tesla. His work on alternating current AC electricity literally powers our modern world. Radio technology, remote controls, early robotics. He was involved in all of it, foundational stuff.
Yet, for the longest time, he was kind of a footnote compared to Edison. Why?
A big part of it was intense business rivalry, the infamous War of Currents. Edison pushed direct current, DC. Tesla championed AC. Edison was a brilliant marketer and businessman, maybe more ruthless.
And Tesla.
Tesla was undeniably brilliant, maybe even more visionary in some ways, but notoriously eccentric, not great with money or self-promotion. And frankly, some of his ideas, like wireless power transmission across the globe, were just so far ahead of their time.
So people couldn't really grasp them or commercialize them easily.
Both. The source really highlights how this mix of science, fierce corporate competition, and even just personality clashes can totally warp who gets the credit and who gets remembered in history.
That's a whole different kind of erasure mechanism. Fascinating.
It really is. And moving into a different kind of conflict, World War II, we find Noor Inayat Khan.
Tell us about her. The name sounds familiar, but maybe not from standard history lessons.
Exactly. 1930s, 40s. She was incredible. Indian-British heritage, actually a descendant of Tipu Sultan, an Indian ruler who fought the British. Raised Sufi, initially pacifist.
Okay, so how did she end up in WWII espionage?
She volunteered for the British Special Operations Executive, became a spy working behind enemy lines in Nazi-occupied France. She was the first female wireless operator sent in.
Wow. That must have been incredibly dangerous.
Unbelievably so. Her entire network, her whole circuit got compromised almost immediately. Everyone else was caught or fled. But she stayed.
She stayed alone.
Alone. For months,
Yeah.
moving constantly, risking capture every single second, transmitting vital intelligence back to London. She outwitted the Gestapo for an astonishingly long time.
What happened in the end?
She was eventually betrayed, captured, tortured, and executed at Dachau concentration camp. Awarded the George Cross posthumously.
An unbelievable story of courage and skill. So why isn't she a household name, especially in Britain?
That's the question, isn't it? The source suggests it highlights how national narratives get shaped. Maybe biases related to her background, her gender. Even in moments of supreme national heroism, contributions from diverse figures can get overlooked or downplayed.
It really makes you think about who gets chosen to represent that collective heroism, whose stories fit the preferred narrative.
Precisely. And sometimes the erasure isn't about heroism overlooked, but about profound ethical questions being ignored. Which brings us to Henrietta Lacks.
Ah, yes. Her story is becoming more widely known now, thankfully, but it's deeply troubling. 1950s America.
Deeply. She was an African-American woman being treated for cervical cancer. During a biopsy, doctors took samples of her cells without her knowledge or consent.
Which was common practice then, especially for Black patients, sadly.
Tragically, yes. But her cells were unique. They were discovered to be immortal. They could reproduce indefinitely in a lab. They became the HeLa cell line.
And those cells, they changed medicine, didn't they?
Fundamentally, the polio vaccine, chemotherapy, gene mapping, IVF, AIDS research, COVID-19 research, countless breakthroughs relied on HeLa cells. They're still used globally today, billions of dollars generated.
And Henrietta Lacks. and her family.
For decades, her name, her identity, her contribution, her very humanity was erased. The cells were just Gila. Her family lived in poverty, unaware of her unknowing gift to science, unable to afford the healthcare advanced by her own cells.
That's just a staggering ethical failure.
It's more than that. It represents a systemic failure of medical ethics, intertwined with profound racial injustice. It forces us to confront the human cost behind scientific progress and the urgent need for recognition and ethical reckoning, especially concerning marginalized communities.
A necessary, painful story.
Yeah.
And that theme of erasure within movements for justice itself continues, doesn't it? Like with Dolores Huerta.
Yes, absolutely. The 1960s and 70s, the farm workers movement in the U.S., everyone knows Cesar Chavez, and rightly so.
He's the face of the movement, for sure.
But Dolores Huerta co-founded the United Farm Workers, UFW, with him. She was an absolutely tireless organizer, a brilliant strategist, a fierce negotiator. She coined the famous slogan, "Si se puede, yes we can."
So she was central to its success.
Indispensable, responsible for many of the UFW's key victories, like the groundbreaking Great Boycott that gained national attention. But so often, the narrative focused almost exclusively on Chavez. Her leadership was minimized, sometimes completely omitted.
Why do you think that was? Gender bias?
That's a huge part of it, according to the source. Even within progressive movements, traditional gender roles and biases can lead to women's contributions being overlooked in favor of male leadership. Plus, her fierce advocacy directly challenged powerful agricultural interests and politicians. She made enemies.
So her very effectiveness made her a target for erasure, in a way.
It seems likely. Her story is a powerful reminder that historical bias exists everywhere, even within movements fighting for equality. We need to look critically at who gets credited.
And finally, let's talk about a more recent figure. Someone whose impact is global and ongoing. Wangari Maathai.
Professor Maathai, an incredible force. From Kenya, active from the 1970s until her passing in 2011, though her legacy is very much alive.
She won the Nobel Peace Prize, right, for environmental work.
Yes, in 2004, she founded the Green Belt Movement, a truly grassroots initiative that mobilized primarily rural women to plant trees. Tens of millions of trees across Kenya and beyond.
Tens of millions. That's amazing.
It was revolutionary. It wasn't just about trees. It was about environmental conservation, sustainable development, women's empowerment, democracy, peace, all interconnected. Her impact is internationally recognized.
So why is she on this list of absent heroes? Surely she's in textbooks.
Globally celebrated, yes. Nobel laureate, yes. But the source points out that she often remains peripheral, kind of an add-on in many Western educational curricula.
So it's about Eurocentrism again.
It points strongly in that direction. How leaders in movements from the global south, even Nobel Prize winners, are often treated as less central, less universally relevant than figures from Europe or North America. It shows the global nature of historical bias and why actively seeking diverse perspectives is so critical.
Wow. Olympe de Gouges, Toussaint Louverture, Tesla, Noor Inayat Khan, Henrietta Lacks, Dolores Huerta, Wangari Maathai.
And these, as the source emphasizes, are just a tiny sample, a few names plucked from an ocean of forgotten contributors.
It really underscores the sheer scale of what's missing from the standard story, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It opens up this vast landscape of hidden history, full of courage and ingenuity we've barely begun to explore.
It's almost overwhelming to think about. And this absence, this invisibility,
Yeah.
it's not just about lost facts, is it? Our source talks about a real psychological toll.
A very real one.
Yeah.
There's a concept the document introduces called symbolic annihilation.
Sounds pretty intense.
It is, but it's crucial for understanding the impact. Symbolic annihilation basically means the absence of representation. When a group is invisible in the media, in culture, in history books, or if they only appear as stereotypes or villains, the message sent is devastatingly simple.
What message is that?
You don't matter. Your people haven't contributed anything worthwhile. You're not part of the main story.
Oh, wow.
For marginalized communities, generations of this invisibility can lead to profound psychological harm. The source links it to generational trauma, identity confusion, like where do I fit if my people aren't in the story, and feelings of historical inferiority.
As if their group just wasn't there or didn't do anything significant.
Exactly. And think about the impact that has on self-esteem, on ambition, on what young people believe is possible for themselves. If you never see heroes who look like you or share your background, it subtly limits your own perceived potential.
So the empty spaces in history books aren't just empty, they're actively harmful. They communicate something damaging.
Precisely. It's a form of violence, in a way, a silencing that echoes through generations.
Which connects directly to the sociological side of things, right? Our source mentions the work of Pierre Bourdieu.
Yes, Bourdieu's ideas are really relevant here. He argued that power isn't just maintained by force, police, armies, laws. It's also maintained, maybe even more effectively, by controlling culture, by controlling the stories a society tells itself.
How does that work?
He called it cultural hegemony. Basically, the dominant culture reinforces its own authority and values by making them seem like the natural, normal, default way of being. And a key way to do that is by controlling history.
By deciding who gets remembered and who gets forgotten.
Exactly. Selectively highlighting figures and events that support the dominant narrative while sidelining or ignoring voices that challenge it, especially voices that are female, non-Western, working class, queer, radical, anyone who disrupts the established order.
It makes the existing power structure seem inevitable, almost natural.
Right. And again, it's not always a conscious plot. It's often deeply embedded in institutions, schools, museums, media. They perpetuate the dominant narrative, often without even realizing they're excluding other valid, vital perspectives. It's the system working as designed, in a sense.
It's like that cultural gravity we talked about, pulling everything towards the center, reinforcing the status quo through the stories we tell.
Precisely. And understanding this historical context, this psychological impact, this sociological mechanism, it perfectly sets the stage for why now we're seeing such a powerful pushback, why these stories are finally surfacing.
Yeah, that's the hopeful part, isn't it? This feeling that things are actually changing. We're seeing this incredible resurgence of interest in these hidden figures. It feels like a real moment of reevaluation.
It absolutely is. There's a palpable hunger for a more complete, more honest history, and this is being fueled by major social movements.
Like which ones?
Well, think about #BlackLivesMatter. It's not just about present-day injustice. It sparked a massive rediscovery of Black history figures, events, resistance movements that were marginalized or completely ignored.
Right, bringing names like, say, the leaders of the Black Panther Party or figures from earlier civil rights struggles back into the conversation in a new way.
Exactly. And #MeToo hasn't just exposed contemporary sexism. It's made people look back and ask, wait, where are the women in this historical event whose contributions were overlooked because of their gender?
And there are movements focused specifically on education too, aren't there?
Yes, like the Decolonize the curriculum movement. It's actively challenging the Eurocentric bias in schools and universities, demanding that histories and perspectives from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Indigenous communities are given equal weight, pushing back against that idea that Western history is world history.
It's great to see this happening on the ground, and popular culture seems to be catching on too.
Definitely. Our source mentions how streaming platforms are putting out documentaries on figures who were previously footnotes, like Claudette Colvin.
Ah, the young woman who refused to give up her bus seat in Montgomery before Rosa Parks.
Exactly, 9 months before. But she was young, pregnant, unmarried, seen as less respectable at the time, so civil rights leaders strategically chose Rosa Parks, who had a different public image, to be the face of the bus boycott.
So Colvin's act of bravery was deliberately sidelined for strategic reasons.
Yes, and the fact that her story and others like hers are now getting mainstream attention shows a real shift. These hidden narratives are breaking through.
And the source says this isn't just about historical accuracy, right?
Yeah.
It's about something more.
Yes, it calls it reclaiming stolen inspiration.
I love that phrase.
Me too. Because when we uncover these diverse role models from the past, people who fought back, innovated, led movements against incredible odds, it gives us new blueprints for action today. It expands our sense of what's possible.
Especially for people from marginalized groups who rarely saw themselves reflected in the traditional hero narrative.
Absolutely. Suddenly they have ancestors, predecessors who are powerful agents of change. That's incredibly affirming and motivating. It can fuel future action in profound ways.
Which directly counters that old myth, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That nagging idea, well, if they were really that important, we would have heard of them.
Oh, that myth is so persistent and so wrong. Our source demolishes it. It argues many of these people weren't erased because they were unimportant or because they failed.
They were erased because they succeeded.
Often, yes. They succeeded in ways that were deeply threatening to existing power structures. Remember Dolores Huerta. Her success in organizing farm workers scared powerful agricultural interests.
Right, because she was effective. She won victories.
Exactly, and Henrietta Lacks. Her cells were invaluable, but the story of how they were obtained exposed deep ethical flaws in the medical establishment. Their impact, their success in different ways, made their stories dangerous to the status quo.
So invisibility isn't proof of insignificance. Sometimes it's proof of just how significant and threatening they actually were.
Precisely. Which leads to another point, the debate around rewriting history.
Yeah, you hear that a lot. Critics saying, you're trying to change the past. Erase our heroes.
It's a common pushback, but the source makes a crucial distinction. It's not about rewriting history in a negative sense. It's about correcting it.
What's the difference?
Think of history like science. It's not static. It's an ongoing process of discovery and interpretation. When the first draft of history was written with huge biases, with deliberate omissions, with entire groups left out, well, that first draft wasn't accurate.
So correcting it is just.
Yeah.
Good scholarship, good history.
Exactly. Revisionism, in the academic sense, isn't a bad word. It's essential when the initial account was flawed or incomplete. It's about filling the gaps, adding the missing perspectives, challenging old assumptions to get closer to a more complete, more truthful understanding. It's about building a richer picture, not tearing things down.
That makes so much sense. History as a living document, constantly being refined. And this process uncovers some genuinely surprising things, doesn't it? Things that challenge what we thought we knew.
Oh, definitely. The source has some fantastic examples. Take Ada Lovelace.
Okay, daughter of Lord Byron, mathematician. Associated with Charles Babbage and his early computer ideas.
Right. But she wasn't just Babbage's assistant or interpreter. Back in the 1840s, she wrote what's now recognized as the world's first computer program, an algorithm for Babbage's theoretical analytical engine.
The first computer program in the 1840s by a woman.
Yes. And she didn't just see it as a number-crunching machine. She had this incredible vision, understanding its potential to manipulate symbols, create music, generate art. She basically foresaw modern computing a century before it happened.
That's absolutely mind-blowing. Why was Babbage always the focus?
Well, gender bias in science is a big part of the story. For a long time, her conceptual contributions were downplayed, and he got most of the credit. Only relatively recently has her true foundational role been widely acknowledged.
Incredible. The very origins of computing, hidden by bias. Who else?
How about Bhikhaji Cama? Early 20th century, an Indian independence activist living in exile in Europe.
What did she do?
In 1907, at an international socialist conference in Germany, she unfurled one of the very first versions of the Indian flag, a tricolor she helped design. She gave this fiery speech denouncing British rule, demanding human rights and autonomy for India right there on an international stage.
Wow, that took guts.
Absolutely. She was a major force, publishing revolutionary literature, connecting activists across Europe, really helping to internationalize the fight against colonialism, a key catalyst, but often overlooked in narratives focused solely on events within India.
So she shows how these struggles were global, interconnected.
Exactly. And then there's something that many people might only know from a movie title, which kind of missed the point. The Green Book.
Right, the travel guide for Black Americans during segregation.
Not just a travel guide, the essential survival guide, published annually for decades by Victor Hugo Green. In the Jim Crow era, travel was incredibly dangerous for Black people.
It could be denied service, threatened, attacked.
Or worse. The Green Book listed safe places, hotels, restaurants, gas stations, even private homes where Black travelers could find service and refuge without facing humiliation or violence. It was a lifeline.
It represents this whole hidden network of resilience and community support, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's a testament to the ingenuity required just to navigate daily life under extreme systemic oppression. It tells a powerful story of survival and strategic resistance that goes way beyond the Hollywood version.
These examples really show how much richness and complexity lies just beneath the surface of the standard histories.
They really do, and they pave the way for looking at how scholars and thinkers have grappled with these issues more broadly.
Right, because it's not just about individual stories. There are bigger theoretical frameworks here. Our source brings in some major figures.
Indeed. It's impossible to discuss this without mentioning Howard Zinn.
A People's History of the United States.
Yeah.
A classic.
Absolutely groundbreaking. Zinn just flipped the script on traditional history. He argued that history shouldn't be told from the perspective of presidents, generals, elites, the top down.
He focused on ordinary people, right?
Exactly. Workers, women, immigrants, enslaved people, indigenous peoples, dissidents. He said their stories, their struggles, their resistance, that's the real engine of history. You have to look at the margins at the bottom up to understand how society actually changes.
It completely reorients your perspective on the past.
It really does. And then the source pairs in with Angela Davis, who brings a different, perhaps even more urgent perspective.
So.
Davis builds on Zinn, but adds this powerful critique of erasure as a form of violence. Her famous line, "To forget is to be complicit," is key.
Complicit in what?
Complicit in ongoing oppression. For Davis, forgetting isn't passive. It's an active process that enables injustice to continue by denying people their history, their identity, their legacy of resistance. It suggests their struggles didn't matter or didn't happen.
So remembering becomes a political act, an act of resistance.
Precisely. She links historical memory directly to contemporary struggles for liberation. If you erase a group's history of fighting back, you weaken their ability to fight back now. Remembering is reclaiming power.
Wow. So Zinn shows us where to look for hidden history in the collective struggles of the marginalized. And Davis tells us why it's morally imperative to look, framing forgetting as violence.
That's a great summary. But the source also introduces a counterpoint, a nuance to this.
Okay.
Some cultural historians argue that while finding individual heroes is important, focusing too much on them can be its own kind of problem.
How could celebrating heroes be a problem?
The concern is that it might reinforce a great person theory of history. You know, the idea that change only happens because of a few extraordinary individuals.
Obscuring the collective effort.
Exactly. It risks overlooking the power of mass movements, grassroots organizing, the countless anonymous people whose combined efforts actually drive change. So this perspective suggests that maybe emphasizing movements over individual heroes is another way, perhaps a more accurate way, to understand and empower ourselves through history. It's about the collective, not just the star.
That's a really important point. It's rarely just one person acting alone. History is collaborative, even when it looks like it isn't.
Precisely. And having this range of perspectives, Zinn Davis, The Critique of Hero Worship, gives us a really strong foundation for looking at more detailed case studies.
Yeah, let's get back to the people. Our source has some incredibly compelling examples that really illustrate these complexities.
Okay, let's start with Bayard Rustin. We mentioned him briefly, but his story deserves focus.
The strategist behind Martin Luther King Jr.
The absolute chief strategist and organizer, especially for the 1963 March on Washington, an absolute genius of nonviolent direct action. He orchestrated that entire massive historic event.
So why isn't he as famous as King?
Because Rustin was Black, openly gay, and had past socialist affiliations. In the context of the 1950s and 60s, that combination was seen as deeply problematic, even by many within the civil rights movement.
They worried he would damage the movement's image.
Exactly. There was intense pressure, even from allies, for him to stay in the background. His identity made him inconvenient, despite his brilliance. He operated largely from the shadows, his contributions deliberately downplayed for decades.
It's heartbreaking. It shows how even progressive movements can enforce their own forms of erasure based on intersecting identities.
It's a stark example. His story forces us to confront the internal complexities and compromises within social movements.
Okay, who else?
How about Sybil Ludington, back to the American Revolution?
Not Paul Revere.
Think of her as the female, teenage, arguably more impressive Paul Revere. In 1777, she was just 16. She rode her horse through the night, in the rain, covering about 40 miles, twice Revere's distance.
40 miles. At 16. Why?
To warn the local militia that British troops were attacking nearby Danbury, Connecticut, to destroy supplies. She rallied hundreds of soldiers. It was an incredible feat of bravery and endurance.
So what do we all know Revere? Immortalized in poems, and hardly anyone knows Ludington.
Well, gender bias is the obvious answer. History preferred the male hero. Plus, narratives tend to simplify. Revere's story became the story of the Midnight Ride, eclipsing others like Ludington's, whose feat was arguably greater but didn't fit the neat, male-centric mold.
Another incredible story lost to simplification and bias.
And let's go global again to Nigeria, 1929, to Nwanyiruwa.
Okay, tell me about her.
She was an Igbo market woman. The British colonial authorities were imposing new taxes, particularly on women, threatening their economic independence. Nwanyiruwa had a direct confrontation with a census taker, which became the spark.
The spark for what?
For what became known as the Nigerian Women's War, or the Aba Women's Riots. It wasn't really a war with weapons, but a massive uprising of thousands, primarily women, using methods of protest rooted in Igbo traditions, sitting on men, public shaming, confronting officials, disrupting colonial courts.
Women leading a major anti-colonial revolt.
Yes, against British rule, sparked by one woman's defiance. It was a huge event. But guess how often it appears in standard Western histories of colonialism?
Let me guess. Almost never.
Pretty much. It completely disrupts the narrative of passive natives or male-led resistance. It showcases women's power, indigenous forms of protest, and anti-colonial struggle from the grassroots up. Another victim of Eurocentric and patriarchal historical bias.
Rustin, Ludington, Noen. Each story reveals a different facet of erasure.
Yeah.
It really drives home that point about cultural variation too, doesn't it? Who gets remembered depends heavily on where you are.
Massively. The source really digs into this. In the West, as we've seen, the tendency is towards white male political or military leaders. Science, activism, contributions by women or minorities, often secondary, if mentioned at all. It reinforces a particular view of power and progress.
Okay, standard Western bias. What about elsewhere? Like in post-colonial nations?
There, you often find national heroes who are huge figures domestically, but virtually unknown internationally. They become folk legends, celebrated in local stories, songs, monuments, but they don't make it into the global, often Western-dominated canon.
You give examples.
The source mentions Jose Rizal in the Philippines, a national icon there for his role in inspiring the independence movement against Spain. His face is on currency, statues everywhere. But outside the Philippines, largely unknown. Or Ya Santawa in Ghana, the Queen Mother who led the Ashanti resistance against the British in 1900. A revered figure in Ghana and West Africa, a symbol of female leadership and anti-colonial defiance, but again, barely registers in most Western historical accounts.
So heroes can be huge in one context and invisible in another.
Exactly, and then you have indigenous cultures where the whole concept of heroism can be radically different.
How so?
In many indigenous worldviews, heroism isn't about the singular, outstanding individual. It's often understood as communal. Achievement, wisdom, courage. These are seen as collective attributes, distributed across the community, linked to the land, connected to ancestors and future generations.
So the idea of pulling out one hero might not even make sense in that framework.
It might conflict directly with their way of remembering and valuing history, which is often embedded in oral traditions, ceremonies, and relationships, not in celebrating lone figures. It's a profound difference in perspective that challenges our Western assumptions about who and what is historically significant.
Understanding these variations is crucial. It stops us from imposing one single definition of importance onto the whole world.
Precisely. It allows for a much richer, more complex appreciation of the past.
Okay, so we've seen why erasure happens, the impact it has, the pushback against it, and how memory varies culturally. Now, let's get critical. What are the real pros and cons of this effort to highlight hidden heroes?
Great question. The source outlines both strengths and potential weaknesses. Let's start with the strengths, which are pretty compelling.
Go for it.
First, it restores agency. It counters the narrative that marginalized groups were just passive victims. Seeing ancestors as active resistors, innovators, leaders, that's incredibly empowering.
Okay, restoring agency. What else?
It inspires modern activism. Finding diverse, relatable role models from the past, people who look like you or faced similar struggles and still made a difference, provides powerful motivation and practical examples for tackling today's challenges.
Makes sense. Inspiration from the past.
And third, it fosters critical thinking. When you realize the official story is incomplete or biased, it encourages you, everyone listening, to question all narratives, to dig deeper, to demand a more complex truth. It makes you a more discerning consumer of history.
Those are huge benefits. Agency, inspiration, critical thinking. What about the potential downsides or risks?
The source acknowledges a few. One is the danger of slipping into hero worship.
Meaning
We might over-glorify these rediscovered figures, sanitize their stories, ignore their flaws or complexities. We make them into perfect icons rather than real, complicated humans. That can make their achievements seem unattainable.
Right, making them unrelatable in a different way. Any other risks?
There's also the potential for defensive backlash. As we've seen, challenging established narratives can make people uncomfortable, especially those invested in the traditional story. It can lead to resistance, accusations of political correctness, and efforts to shut down these conversations.
The discomfort of having long-held beliefs questioned.
Exactly. But the source concludes, and I tend to agree, that ultimately the benefits outweigh the discomfort. A more complete, truthful, and inclusive history serves everyone better in the long run, even if the process of getting there involves some difficult conversations.
Building a more honest picture, even if it means confronting uncomfortable truths.
That's the goal.
So, stepping back one last time, why does all this matter so much right now? What are the big takeaways for us?
I think the core message is that history isn't just about the past. It fundamentally shapes our present and our future. Denying people their history, erasing contributions, literally robs the future of possibilities.
How so?
We lose potential role models, yes, but we also lose knowledge. Forgotten strategies for resistance, overlooked innovations, different ways of organizing societies. In a world facing huge crises, climate change, inequality, democratic backsliding, maybe the solutions we need aren't just in the stories we already know.
Maybe they're hidden in those silenced whispers.
That's what the source suggests. The blueprints for survival, for transformation, might lie with those who were pushed to the margins, those left out of the textbooks. Reclaiming their stories isn't just about justice for the past, it's a vital resource for the future. It's that radical act of truth-telling.
That's a powerful way to frame it. And it leaves us with some big questions moving forward, doesn't it?
Huge questions. Like, how will technology, AI, digital archives change historical memory? Will it help uncover hidden stories, or will algorithms just replicate old biases?
A double-edged sword, potentially.
And can education systems globally really shift away from entrenched Eurocentric models towards truly inclusive, pluralistic histories? That's a massive challenge.
It really is. And the final question the source leaves us with is maybe the most personal one.
Which is?
Who are the unsung heroes of today? Whose stories are we overlooking right now in our own communities, in our own time? Who will future generations need to rediscover?
It turns the lens back on us, doesn't it? Encouraging us to be conscious observers, active rememberers in the history that's unfolding around us right now.
Absolutely. Well, this has been an incredible journey through hidden history. We've talked about why stories get erased, the deep impact of that erasure, and the powerful movements bringing these forgotten heroes back into the light.
It's been fascinating to unpack, and it really underscores that history is dynamic, not static.
Definitely. And I think the final thought from our source material is the perfect place to end.
Let's hear it.
History isn't a closed book, it's a living document. Every time we unearth a forgotten name, we rewrite the boundaries of what's possible. And in doing so, we give future generations not just facts, but the courage to act.
Wow, that gives me chills. The courage to act.
Me too. So keep questioning, keep exploring, keep digging deeper than the surface story. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.